Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you very much, Zoe, for that kind introduction. Thank you, AMCO. I'll say a few more words, Dan, for hosting us here this morning. Merci à tous nos exceptionnels candidats libéraux ici aujourd'hui. You know, this is, we're here at AMCO, a remarkable company, remarkable success story, founded just a couple years after I was born, and in 1967. I almost said 1867. I was not that old. But a company, a dynamic company, a lot into auto parts, a lot graphics. You'll see the graphics across Canada for financial services companies and others, but also adapting constantly, tackling new sectors like med tech, like clean energy, clean tech, industrial equipment. And really, you know, still a young company, an ambitious company with plans to compete in new markets. And that's the confident and Canadian way to deal with the crisis that we're in, a crisis which very much continues. Just yesterday, President Trump repeated his attacks on Canada. He said he doesn't want Canada, I'm quoting, to play any part in the American auto industry. So I'll be equally clear. This is Canada. We decide what happens here. Yesterday was more proof, as if any were needed, that the old relationship with the United States is over, and proof that we need to chart a new path. As I've been saying, this is a tragedy, but it's also our new reality. President Trump has been attacking Canada, America's closest ally, America's closest partner. Il menace nos entreprises, il menace nos travailleurs, il menace les économies de nos retraités. And President Trump, what he wants to do is to divide us because that makes his job easier. He's trying to break us so that America can own us. Now, as I've said repeatedly, and I hear back from Canadians, that will never happen. Canada is fighting back with counter tariffs of our own, which will cause maximum damage in the United States with having only minimum impact here in Canada. And we're returning all of those proceeds from those tariffs to protect our workers and the businesses that are most affected by the trade war. And taking inspiration from AMCO, we are building the future. My government has anticipated the depths of this crisis. A few weeks ago, before the U.S. auto tariffs were put in place, we created a $2 billion strategic response fund that will fortify the entire Canadian auto supply chain, from raw materials to finished vehicles. We're investing in the future of the auto industry by building an all-in-Canada network for auto parts manufacturing. And we're developing new markets with reliable partners. We are preparing to build our critical minerals industry. We're developing our leadership in clean energy and clean tech. Nous travaillons en partenariat avec les provinces, les territoires et les communautés autochtones pour accélérer la réalisation de projets majeurs. Ensemble, nous allons bâtir l'économie la plus forte du G7, une économie indépendante des États-Unis. Here in BC and across Canada, I'm asking for you to vote with me for positive reasons, regardless of which party you voted for in the past. Because this is a time for serious leadership of a united country. We need to come together so we can fight President Trump together. We can control our economic destiny with the right plan. Because in a crisis, plan beats no plan. And to succeed in a crisis, you need to act with overwhelming force, to overcome the anxieties that people naturally feel, to break through the fog of uncertainty that businesses face, and above all, to replace what the crisis is taking away. In a crisis, as the private sector retreats, Government needs to step up to provide direction, to drive action, and catalyze investment. And that's what our plan to build Canada strong will do. Building Canada strong in the face of the Trump tariffs begins with building housing that is affordable. Sur la question de logement, mon gouvernement va voir en grand. Nous avons l'objectif de construire un demi-million de logements par année, 2 fois plus qu'aujourd'hui. C'est le plan de construction de logements le plus ambitieux depuis la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. We will build homes you can afford to buy, homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in, homes made using Canadian ingenuity, Canadian labor, Canadian products, including softwood lumber and mass timber, houses that are Canadian to the core. The first part of our plan is to create an entirely new entity, Build Canada Homes, to develop new affordable housing projects. We're going to get the government back into the business of building affordable homes. We're going to provide billions of dollars in financing for affordable home builders. And we will catalyze a whole new housing industry with BC technology, BC skilled workers, and BC lumber at the center of it. Our ambitious housing plan will also cut the development charges in half for multi-unit housing. That's about $60,000 off the average apartment in Vancouver. We'll bring back the multi-unit residential buildings tax incentive, which when it was originally introduced in the 70s spurred tens of thousands of rental housing units across the country. Pour inciter les promoteurs immobiliers, nous allons ramener la déduction fiscale pour les immeubles résidentiels locatifs, qui, dans les années 70, a permis de bâtir des dizaines de milliers de logements. All of these actions don't just build houses. They build economic strength at home, and they build negotiating leverage with the Americans. Now, while we're building homes, we also have to build safety at home. Misguided American policies backed by President Trump are not only threatening our economy, they're also threatening the safety of our communities. Criminals are taking advantage of irresponsible American gun laws and their weak border enforcement to bring illegal guns into Canada. So we're taking action. While criminals are trying to illegally import guns from the United States to Canada, Pierre Poilievre is trying to import US-style gun laws to our country. But you can't be serious about being tough on crime if you're not willing to be tough on guns. You can't be serious about stopping intimate partner violence without being serious about gun control. We are not America. We are Canada, and we are serious. If elected, my government will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of violent offenses, including intimate partner violence. We will strengthen firearm licensing and invest in labs to increase our capacity to track down guns used in crimes. We will reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, not the gun industry. In contrast, Pierre Poilievre has voted against every single gun control measure in his decades-long career in the House of Commons. And crucially, we will also help tackle the toxic drug crisis head-on, because we know that the current approach isn't working. Fentanyl has taken far too many lives, far too soon, here in BC and across Canada. We need solutions, not slogans. That's why our plan is to disrupt the supply chain, to penalize those responsible for peddling drugs and disgracefully profiting off the pain and suffering of others, and to better support the loved ones dealing with the addiction. We will help stem the tide of drugs coming across the U.S. border by recruiting 1,000 more RCMP personnel and 1,000 more Canada Border Service agents, officers. Nous allons permettre aux forces de police de confisquer la contrebande, incluant le fentanyl, dans le corridor de Post Canada. Nous allons renforcer les services de poursuite pénale du Canada pour nous assurer que ceux qui profitent du crime soient traduits en justice. We're adding $500 million to the Emergency Treatment Fund to support municipalities, Indigenous peoples, and community healthcare organizations to confront the toxic drug crisis head-on, and to connect more people to treatment and vital services faster. We're also establishing a permanent youth mental health fund that will provide 100,000 young people every year with mental health care. Because mental health and addiction are deeply interlinked. We need to tackle the sources of this crisis, not just the symptoms. Il faut faire en sorte que les jeunes Canadiens et Canadiennes restent loin de la criminalité. Il faut s'assurer qu'ils ont tout ce qu'il faut pour grandir en santé et réussir à l'école. C'est pourquoi les programmes pour les garderies, les repas à l'école et les soins dentaires et la construction de logements abordables sont aussi importants. Il faut aussi orienter les jeunes vers des vraies opportunités de réussite. Nous allons le faire appuyant les programmes et les initiatives autochtones qui permettent de le faire et créer de bonnes carrières dans les métiers spécialisés en investissant dans la formation. With our plan, we'll ensure that Canadians are safer, that our borders better protect us from guns, from crime, and toxic drugs. We will end the housing crisis while building an entirely new industry based on BC technology, skilled workers, and lumber. We will build Canada strong. And with that, I'd be pleased to take your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll start with the media delegation for 15 minutes. Laurence?
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Monsieur Carney, pourquoi vous avez dit que Monsieur Trump a respecté la souveraineté du Canada durant votre appel alors qu'il a évoqué le 51e État?
Soyons clairs. Je suis toujours clair avec tout le monde, en public, au privé, y compris le président, qui soulève cette question, que cela n'arriverait jamais. Cela n'arriverait jamais. Et le président et moi, nous avons convenu que le Canada et les États-Unis commenceront des négociations en ce qui concerne nos relations économiques et sécuritaires, étant nation souveraine après l'élection. Et les commentaires du président hier soulignent l'importance du choix pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens lundi prochain dans l'élection. Qui va tenir debout au président Trump?
Mais qu'est-ce que vous lui avez répondu à M. Trump durant votre appel quand il a parlé du 51e État? Qu'est-ce que vous lui avez dit?
Je dis à tout le monde, y compris le président, ça n'arriverait jamais.
Next question.
Prochaine question.
Prochaine question.
To be clear, as I've said to anyone who's raised this issue, in private or in public, including the President, that it will never happen. And the President and I, when we spoke, we agreed that Canada and the United States, as sovereign nations, would begin negotiations on our economic and security relationship following the federal election. And I think the President's comments yesterday and before that just underscore how important the choice that Canadians have on Monday, who can stand up to President Trump? Who can build Canada strong? Who has the experience in order to do that? That's the crucial choice that Canadians need to make.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. Carney. Ashley Burke, CBC News. On March 28th, did President Trump bring up the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state during that call with you?
As I just said, the President brings this up all the time. He brought it up yesterday, he's brought it up before. There's a difference between the conversation that was held between leaders of government, which was this conversation, and a discussion that led directly to an agreement that as sovereign countries we would have negotiations about our partnership following the election on Monday. That's what the President and I agreed. That's what both of us reported back. And that's what I'm ready to do. And what's at stake in this election is how well we come together as a country for those difficult discussions with the Americans. And to be clear, you know, I have said well before that call and virtually every time that I've spoken since that call, that President Trump, the Americans, want to break us so they can own us. Those aren't just words. That's what's at risk. That's why we have to build Canada strong. That's why we have to go hard. That's why we have to negotiate properly. That's not why we have to build outside options. That's why we have the plan that we do.
I asked you about this on March 28th after the call, and you said that President Trump respected Canada's sovereignty both privately and in his public conversations.
He did.
Were you being truthful?
He absolutely did. He absolutely did. Look, the President has certain things in his mind that he reverts back to all the time. But treated me as the Prime Minister, not as something else. I'm not even going to say the word he used to use about my predecessor. Treated me as the Prime Minister. We had discussions as sovereign nations. We agreed as sovereign nations that these negotiations will begin after the election on Monday. And that is how it was reported back, and that's absolutely accurate. So that's the treatment. Now, look, the President says lots of things, but the essence of the discussion and where we moved the conversation to was exactly what I said. Treated us with respect as a sovereign nation. We have these negotiations coming, and that's, just to be clear, that is what's at stake. Both things are true. The desire of the Americans and the President to own us, those aren't just words. That's a desire. And the ability of Canada to stand strong, build our own, control our destiny, and in that context, as a sovereign nation, have those discussions.
Prochaine question. Next question. In respect to your colleagues, next question.
C'est presque la même question, en effet. Mais c'est déjà fait. C'est déjà traduit, je crois.
Next question.
Monsieur.
Hi, Mr. Carney, Mackenzie Gray with Global
Yeah.
News. I think you've ducked Ashley and Laurence's question, so I just give you one opportunity again. Yes or no, did Mr. Trump bring up the 51st state in his call with you?
I said that he did. I said that he did. But the President, to be clear, il l'a soulevé. C'est correct? Mais il a soulevé beaucoup d'enjeux. Mais la discussion au sein, c'est une discussion de pays souverains. Sorry, Mackenzie, I should be answering you in English. Him raising something and then where the discussion is, he has these things in his mind. This is not news. He raises it all the time. Okay? But then the question is, what's going to be done with it? And does he understand where we stand, but more particularly where I stand? He is under no illusions. Never, absolutely not, never. Move on. It's two sovereign nations coming together, negotiating our partnership, our relationship. And the question is, will there be a deal that's acceptable to Canada? There's a lot that will never be on the table in those negotiations, and I've been absolutely clear about that. Je viens de le dire, je crois, j'essaie déjà. Il faut le suivre. Beaucoup de questions, très rapides, je sais. Continue, Mackenzie, sorry.
Yeah, going forward, you've talked about that economic and security deal that you want to negotiate with the president. When my colleague Brian Platt asked you yesterday about what conditions would be involved in sitting down with the president, one thing you didn't say was respect for Canada, which is something you previously said before. So I just want to be clear. Is that still something, respect 100%. For Canada, that needs to be done?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Look, this is not, this has to be a serious discussion, sovereign nations. That's what he and I agreed. It has to, that has to remain the case. It's not a photo op. It's not a visit to Mar-a-Lago. It's not any of those things. And I also want to be clear that these will be tough negotiations. These will be tough discussions. But that's why, that and many other reasons, is why we build Canada strong. It puts us in a better position. Look, we are absolutely clear, and I say this, but reality is behind it. We can give ourselves far more than the Americans can take away. I'll put numbers on this just for a second. The Bank of Canada thinks worst case U.S. trade war, global trade war, it's about $125 billion off our economy a few years out. Just free trade in Canada is $200 billion for Canada. That's before all the investment we're talking about in housing. That's before the investment in energy. That's before the investment in new trade corridors and critical minerals and others, okay? So by building the country, this is why I'm so focused and we're so focused on building Canada strong. Yes, it's creating good jobs, a better future for our country, but it also gives us leverage. It gives us leverage in the negotiation. We don't have to do a deal in the short term. We will do the right deal. My government will do the right deal, the best deal for Canada. That's why I'm asking people for their vote, so we are in a position to accomplish it for them.
Prochaine question.
Michel Sabat, la presse canadienne. Pourquoi ne pas avoir dévoilé le 28 mars que M. Trump ait soulevé le sujet du 51e État et avez-vous été transparent?
Oui, je suis transparent. Ce qui est important, il y a un appel, il y a beaucoup de discussions dedans. Et ce qui est important, c'est le résultat de l'appel. Et les conclusions des États-Unis, Monsieur le Président, et le Canada sont les mêmes. Okay? Une bonne discussion, très constructive. Ces négociations qui commenceront après l'élection. Troisième point, j'ai dit à lui, nous allons, à ce moment-là, nous allons faire des contre-tarifs par rapport au secteur automobile. Je lui ai avisé ça. Et je l'ai fait. Point final, j'ai dit à lui, je vais travailler fortement afin de gagner la confiance des Canadiens et Canadiens dans cette élection. What's important, we talked about lots of things, okay? And what's important is the conclusions of the call, the results of the call. And those are exactly the same on the American side and the Canadian side, what President Trump's readout, our readout of the call. And those were that it was very constructive, number one. Number two, that we agreed to have these negotiations that would begin following this election, this crucial election that's happening on Monday. Thirdly, that I advised him that we did, subsequently, as you know, and that I also observed the obvious point, but important to underscore it, that I would be working hard to gain the confidence of Canadians for the election on Monday, which is why, again, to underscore how crucial this election is, for many reasons, but above all because of the stakes. To underscore again, the President, his ideas in his head, his designs, he wants to break us so he can own us. The question is, who's going to stand up to that? I'm ready to do it.
M. Carney, en tout respect, vous n'avez pas répondu à au premier volet de ma question et je suis certain qu'il va revenir dans les prochaines heures, les prochains jours si vous ne le faites pas. Donc, j'aimerais quand même que vous le faites. Pourquoi ne pas avoir dit le 28 mars dernier que M. Trump avait soulevé ce sujet du 51e État? Et je vais vous poser ma question de suivi, OK, parce que j'ai besoin de ça aussi. Il y a M. Legault ce matin, le premier ministre du Québec, qui a refait ses demandes en matière d'immigration. Ces craintes, est-ce qu'elles sont légitimes et allez-vous y acquiescer?
En ce qui concerne les objectifs du gouvernement du Québec en ce qui concerne l'immigration, c'est l'immigration plus des demandeurs d'asile, oui. Oui, absolument, il faut... je suis d'accord avec lui, la nécessité de réduire le niveau d'immigrants temporaires au Québec et comme il le sait, et vous le savez, c'est une responsabilité partagée entre le gouvernement fédéral et le Québec et il faut travailler dans une étroite collaboration afin d'atteindre cet objectif.
Last question from the media delegation.
Il y en a 3 questions.
Le volet numéro 1.
Pardon?
Last
Pardon,
question.
monsieur.
Le volet sur pourquoi pas avoir dévoilé le sujet.
Monsieur, il y a plusieurs enjeux. On a discuté plusieurs enjeux. Ce qui est important, c'est les conclusions. Les conclusions du président des États-Unis et le premier ministre du Canada. Et les conclusions sont claires. J'ai dit non, jamais, et la conversation continue.
Last question.
Anya Codadeglia, Canadian Press. Mr. Carney, your party platform would add $130 billion in new measures to the fiscal framework. Can you spell out to Canadians what's your fiscal anchor? What's the precise metric or guardrail that you're using there?
Yeah, there's a couple of important fiscal anchors. One is that we believe that there should be no borrowing except for capital projects. To be more specific, if the government is going to borrow, assets need to be created. Most of those assets will be created in the private sector. Through investment tax credits, for example, accelerated depreciation or other projects, first point. The second is that a stable and then declining debt to GDP ratio, which is what our platform does achieve. It achieves both. And I think the third I would add to that, which is critical, is absolute transparency. So transparency about the measures, transparency about the difference between capital and operating, transparency about the forecast. And we would reinforce the Parliamentary Budget Office. And I just draw a very clear distinction between our platform, which is very clear and transparent, got the highest rating from the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, headed by the ex-head of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Kevin Page, their detailed analysis, higher rating than all the other parties, and included one fundamental aspect here, which is we didn't play fiscal tricks with phantom growth and dynamic accounting in order to massage the numbers. No, the numbers are clear. We hold to them.
And speaking of numbers, are there any specific metrics or numbers that you can share about what you have in mind?
Sorry, as I said a moment ago, if you look at debt to GDP as an overall anchor, and then the composition of the deficit being a crucial aspect.
We'll take one question from local media.
Mr. Carney, Joe Sadowski with City News Vancouver. While the proposed increase in the RCMP personnel, CBSA officers, and funding for treatment and youth mental health initiatives is a step towards addressing the toxic drug crisis, how will the government ensure that these measures effectively target the root causes of this crisis and evolving other methods like that? And what's your government going to do?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You capture both ends of it. Rightly, which is what we're trying to do, obviously in partnership with the province of BC and then down through law enforcement, first responders, health professionals, and beyond. Social workers, very important part of this. We're going to control the borders better on both sides. We're going to do more on law enforcement. We're going to tighten the penalties in and around this. But then very importantly, going to the root causes, and there are many, but some that we can most directly affect are, again, working in partnership, but around homelessness. Deeply affordable housing, the absence of deeply affordable housing is a huge challenge for this, and that is why our housing program is so ambitious, and that is why our housing program has a big element of the government driving things, because if we just leave it to the market, as basically has been done for the last 20, 25 years, it won't happen. So that's why we're stepping up. And then secondly, as you mentioned briefly, and I mentioned in my remarks, and there's a lot behind what I'm about to say, is a very deliberative focus around mental health, youth mental health, permanent programs being put in place so professionals can rely on those, plan, build that out. We do have a mental health crisis in this country, and the knock-on effects of that and being amplified through the horrors of addiction are deeply painful, and I think, you know, within many in this room, I would say, you know, would have experience with that, so.
Thank you.
Hi, Jared Yeager with the Western Standard. Just following up on the drug crisis. So Gregor Robertson, your candidate for Vancouver Fraserview South Burnaby, he was one of the leading advocates for drug decriminalization, and while he was mayor of Vancouver, overdoses increased by 600%.